Many. So anyway, good evening, and thanks for joining us today. This is my talk, Don't Get Pulled Under by the AI Hype Wave. And I'll start off by telling you who I am. I'm Timothy Allen, a principal engineer at Wharton Research Data Services here at the Wharton School. Feel free to call me Tim, just not Tim Allen. I'm a member of the Python Software Foundation and the Django Software Foundation. As I just mentioned, I'm a member of the Wagtail core team. I'm also a DjangoCon US organizer. I help organize the Philly Python Users Group and Barcamp Philadelphia. I've been writing code since 1980 when I was 6 years old. And I live and breathe technology, and I have my entire life. And over these years, I've seen a lot of tech trends. I've been closely involved with a few of these overhyped trends and contributed to the hype myself in the past. So I'm hoping that I can share some of the mistakes I've made in the past so we can all learn together and hopefully avoid some dangerous pitfalls. What I'm not is any kind of AI expert, a ChatGPT zealot, or some kind of meta llama herder, or whatever the hell they're calling that. But I have been immersed in technology my whole life, and I've seen patterns repeat themselves. And the first primitive AI programs I used were in the late 1980s, based off the Eliza program developed at MIT. Eliza was a program developed in the 1960s at MIT, which people actually thought was an actual therapist, where you would type text into a box, a text prompt, and it would analyze the tokens of the sentence you text in. It would figure out what the most important word you typed it in was and echo it back to the user. And it was actually the first conversational AI that ever took major hold. And for the next couple decades was pretty popular in tech circles. It's something that was pretty impressive because it actually analyzed tokens and spit them back conversationally, like you were having a conversation with a computer. You could type in text and it would type back to you and you could go back and forth. And it got so popular enough that an effect was coined called the Eliza effect. And the Eliza effect is the tendency to project human traits, such as experience, semantic comprehension, or empathy, into computer programs that have a textual interface. And this effect is a category mistake that arises when a program's symbolic computations are described through terms such as think, know, or understand. And that's the Wikipedia definition for the Eliza effect that's been on the books for years. But does that sound familiar to anybody? Isn't that kind of what we're doing now with AI? So I think it's important to know that history. A July 2023 report from professional services KPMG found that 97% of the 200 senior US business leaders it polled believe that generative AI will have a huge impact on their organization in the short terms. 93% will believe that it will provide value to their business, but 80% believe it will disrupt their industry at the same time. And it's this kind of thinking that lets tech bros, you know, the folks who were really into blockchain about 20 months ago and are now suddenly all about AI, it allows them to dominate the media cycle. And we've got to stop falling for it because this level of hype blocks us from improving the human condition with technology. It makes it impossible to find the true utility of new technologies by blinding the world in a combination of hype and fear. And there are definitely useful technologies and techniques behind the curtain here. I am not anti-machine learning, but the race to the bottom here is dangerous. So I keep putting AI in quotation marks because it isn't artificial intelligence. We're really talking about three different technologies that are developing and evolving. The first are predictive models. These are used for things like forecasting. Looking at data from the past events, we can predict what will happen in the future, right? So, you know, we've heard for years when a hurricane is coming and about the American model versus the European model. That's an example of sort of forecasting models that we're looking into now, predictive models. The second are causal models, which are used for explaining why things have happened in the past. They analyze large amounts of data to determine cause and effect. But what we've been hearing about in the absurd wave of hype are generative models, which generate a response to input, typically from a text prompt. They generate responses by using a random seed and prediction engine to find the next most likely words or actions to create output by having analyzed a mammoth swath of data to create a decision tree. These have existed for decades. AI is not a technical term. It is a marketing term, and don't fool yourself into believing anything else. These models are advanced and they have parameter counts in the billions, but let me be clear, they are not artificial and they are not intelligent. In a recent conversation between Dirk Dondel, Verizon's head of open source, and Linus Torvalds, creator of Linux and Git, they shared some actual rational thoughts about this. John Dell said that what people are calling AI is basically autocorrect on steroids, over a laugh. And Linus Torvalds quipped, "It's hilarious to watch. Maybe I'll be replaced by an AI model." For anybody who's ever used GitHub Copilot, Git named after Git, which was invented by Linus Torvalds in some kind of circular weird logic, I think it is obvious that Linus Torvalds is not being replaced by AI anytime soon. He continued, "Let's wait 10 years and see where it actually goes before we make all these crazy announcements. Anything that makes our tools smarter is a good thing, but be careful of AI BS." And he didn't mean beautiful science. So this is what the hypesters call generative AI. Although if you want to be accurate, they are machine learning models. And all of this is just a subset of what someday may be called artificial intelligence. This is a chart from a 2010 paper outlining the different fields which may someday coalesce to make AI. As you can see, there are many fields which must coalesce to achieve this dream of artificial intelligence. And even then, it is likely a misnomer. We have to stop giving human attributes to machine learning models. It is dangerous. Here's one example. Right now, AI folks love to say that models hallucinate and talk about hallucinate rate. This removes responsibility for algorithm coders and model trainers. The models do not hallucinate. They make stuff up because a programmer using a random generation function decided that they should. Their responses are frequently inaccurate, laughably so, but it really isn't funny. We are already seeing real-world consequences of this, driving us further away from a collective shared truth. By saying they hallucinate, we are removing the responsibility of the programmer to be ethical. I've been using GitHub Copilot for coding for several months now, and often it's a little more trouble than it's worth. After the initial wow factor of GitHub Copilot wore off, I've been most amazed by how wrong it is most of the time, sometimes dangerously so. Because the machine learning models behind GitHub Copilot have been programmed to lie or make things up instead of saying, "I don't know," they're now making up packages and libraries. We already have major issues with our software supply chain being poisoned by malware. And we saw over the past few weeks with the social engineering hack on the Linux compression utility XZ, this is happening more and more. That made national and worldwide news. And these lies from GitHub Copilot have been shown to be repeatable. So causing a major attack vector for hackers to exploit is now present. Find the package name that's being repeatedly invented by the machine learning models, and then deploy that package, and suddenly you can poison all kinds of supply chains. We're making it way too easy. And this is much worse than copy-pasting code you don't understand from Stack Overflow. This is the Gardner hype cycle chart for emerging technologies in 2023. Generative AI, which again is really machine learning models, is at the peak of inflated expectations. The peak of inflated expectations, aka Mount Hype, is higher than any I've seen in my over 40 years of technology. The curve of the Gardner hype cycle is incredibly similar to another curve. This is the curve of the Dunning-Kruger effect. The two charts being close to identical is not a coincidence. The Dunning-Kruger effect has shown that people with limited competence overestimate their abilities, while high performers tend to underestimate their skill. We're at a crisis point here in the United States. Our education system has left a sizable portion of the population behind. And the unfortunate truth is this portion of the population is easily misled. We saw this in the 2016 election with the effect that foreign actors using troll farms had in seeding divisive content within American social networks. This was before the recent AI explosion, and I fear what's coming our way in this election cycle. We're already starting to see it. And regardless of your political persuasion, I think we can all agree as Americans we don't want Putin and Xi to regularly have their thumb on the scale. And we've made ourselves easy targets for our adversaries to divide and conquer, and have yet to develop against this new weapon we've developed. So this list is just a microcosm of the overhyped trends I've seen throughout the years in technology. And I won't even go into Justin Bieber spending millions of dollars on NFTs a couple years ago. I mean, how's that investment feeling now, Justin? All of these eventually became useful tools in the technology toolbox. It's not like there's nothing here that didn't become useful, but none of them lived anywhere close to up to the hype that was given to them at the time. And we see this pattern over and over again, yet we let it happen over and over again. And who does it really benefit? The media get clickbait by hyping up a technology to the peak of inflated expectations, Mount Stupid, and then they get more clicks by tearing down the technology apart during the descent into the trough of disillusionment. Tech bros dreaming of getting rich quick try to pump it up and get investors to be done with their money. And you know, after Facebook rebranded as Meta and subsequently made the metaverse hype fizzle for like the third time, AI has quickly been climbing to the peak of Mount Stupid. I've been around tech for a really long time, and I've seen many hype cycles, but this is next level. Yeah. This is the Google Trends chart for artificial intelligence, Second Life, and cryptocurrency. The red bump from 2006 to 2008 is the peak of the Second Life hype wave. And its peak is dwarfed by both crypto and AI. The higher the peak of Mount Hype, the harder the fall. So let's talk about Second Life for a moment. Second Life it still exists. It's still profitable. It is a continuous virtual world that has been available to the public for 2003, over 20 years. I was one of the first users. It is the closest thing anyone has come to creating the metaverse, described by Neil Stephenson in Snow Crash. The amount of hype it got in the mid-2000s was truly amazing. It was featured on the cover of Business Week with a multi-article feature inside, featuring yours truly. Yes, I have made it into Business Week, and some Wharton faculty have not. Reuters had a bureau within Second Life with a dedicated reporter reporting on what was going on in Second Life, and IBM was all over it. I accidentally started a company called SL Boutique on a dare while in Second Life, and a couple years later, a company called the Electric Sheep Company bought it from me after a year. They had received over $7 million in angel funds from CBS Viacom, like the TV channel. You know, they don't really invest in places, but they managed to get money from them. And their CEO of the Electric Sheep Company was appearing on stage with the CEO of CBS, Les Moonves, at the time. It was absolute insanity. And while running SL Boutique, I became the first person to sell real-world items for a virtual world currency. So you could buy NVIDIA video cards and computer monitors for the Linden dollar, which was the currency in Second Life. And The Guardian and MTV both covered this. The hype level was insane. It was absolutely crazy. The Electric Sheep Company did an episode of CSI New York with CBS that won an Emmy. Events as mainstream as Jay-Z performances on Jimmy Kimmel's late night talk show were simulcast in virtual arenas. Duran Duran was doing concerts. And the colorful 3D landscape was being talked up as the future face of commerce, advertising, job recruiting, and even dating. Then the media hype died down. And the media, you know, that had been treating Second Life as its absolute darling, completely turned on it. And most people today haven't thought about Second Life for 15 years after it had its 18 months in the sun. It's absolutely amazing how these hype cycles. And I lived through that one. I participated in that one. I contributed to that one. I was one of the people who was like, oh, stop emailing me. Log on to Second Life and shoot me an instant message there. I'm done with this email stuff. You know, I was ready for that next level. It was absolutely insane. So let's talk about a more recent example, fresh in our memories, shall we? This one's going to be a fun one. So here's a simple 3-step process. Find the social media account of somebody who's really overhyping AI right now. Scroll back 20 months and look at all their tweets overhyping blockchain and crypto. It's an easy experiment. So Bitcoin was started in 2009, and the first Bitcoin transaction for a tangible asset occurred on May 22nd, 2010, about 5 years after I did it for the Linden dollar. 2 Papa John's pizzas were delivered for 10,000 Bitcoin, or $680 million at the height of Bitcoin's value. That's $340 million per pizza. The hype didn't really start until a few years later, though. In 2017, companies started putting blockchain or Bitcoin into their names just to increase their stock value. Tulip Bioned Tulip Biomed changed their company name to Bitcoin Services, even though they had nothing to do with Bitcoin. And its stock increased 42,500% during 2017, as you can see by that spike. Now it is worth just over 2 cents per share. During the 2022 Super Bowl, crypto and blockchain reached a fever pitch with Coinbase, Crypto.com, and FTX buying spots, including the infamous QR code ad spot. Remember that during the Eagles Super Bowl? Coinbase's stock has since plunged 90%. Crypto.com had Matt Damon calling us all wusses, encouraging people to be bold and to buy. And if you did, you would have lost an average of 50% of your investment at this point. And then there's FTX. How's that going? FTX collapsed 9 months after that Super Bowl ad in November 22 after solvency concerns involving their trading firm. This shook the already volatile crypto market, causing losses in the billions. This caused a liquidity crisis and a desperate search for bailout funds, with the rival exchange Binance considering buying portions of the company, but they quickly backed out on that. And within days, FTX's CEO, Sam Bankman-Fried, bailed, and the company filed for bankruptcy. Within a few hours, FTX was hacked, and hundreds of millions of remaining tokens were stolen. Bankman-Fried was subsequently arrested in the Bahamas, brought to the US, put on trial, and found guilty, as we all know. So that didn't end too well. Mining crypto took so much energy that the only place to actually make a profit by mining it at the end was Iceland. In Iceland, geothermal electricity makes the utility basically free. So we had started to talk about the environmental cost of crypto a couple of years ago and how it, dwarfed its utility. But that environmental cost of crypto is dwarfed by training these models. Microsoft's latest sustainability report showed a 30% year-over-year increase in water usage. That's 1.7 billion, with a B, more gallons used in just 1 year. This is an OpenAI data center owned by Microsoft in Des Moines, Iowa. Due to the mammoth increase in water usage, the local water utility, West Des Moines Auto Works, will no longer consider future data center construction in the area, despite the boon for employment, unless they can significantly decrease water usage, as it is affecting the local drinking water availability. And guess what kind of neighborhood it's affecting the drinking water availability in? You think it's in a very affluent neighborhood? Nope, it's not. It's in the poorest neighborhoods in the area. So Microsoft is investing huge sums of money in GPU farms to train these LLMs on content they don't own and do not have explicit permission to use, while starting to spend less on their people. That's a huge red flag for me when any company starts to spend more on its tech than it does on its people. At some point, we really need to ask ourselves, is it worth it for the glorified spell check we're now seeing? Let's revisit this trend chart. In the red around 2006, you see Second Life, which was a huge amount of hype. But it pales in comparison to how stupid we've gotten over crypto, and now even worse with quote unquote AI. And so has the spend and the environmental impact. As you can see here, we're spending, just Microsoft, Amazon, and Alphabet alone are spending more than double on their cloud bill than they were before, just a couple of years ago in 2020. So this is Ben Gomes, the genius behind Google Search, who led Google's crown jewel of a division starting in 1999. He was known for putting the end user's concerns first, and thought if the users continued to use Google Search, there would be plenty of advertising opportunities. But in 2019, Google's ad side decided the number of queries wasn't growing fast enough. This is Prabhakar Raghavan, head of Google's ads at the time, who was forcing the issue. He forced Ben Gomes out and became head of search, and Google Search has gone to hell since. Raghavan's previous job, he was the head of search at Yahoo. Frickin' Yahoo from 2005 to 2012. And they thought it'd be a great idea to put him in charge because, yeah, what a legacy. So now he's ruined 2 search engines. It turns out having the entire web tuned for Google's SEO rather than being written for humans is creating a downward spiral, making both the web's content and its search worse and worse. Ragavan prioritized ad links over quality results. Have you noticed in Google, you can no longer tell which links are ads and which are not? They used to be clearly marked and confined separately. Now there's almost no difference between the two. It's ridiculous how bad it's gotten. He also removed two major changes that Ben Gomes had rolled out in 2012 and 2019 to avoid having spammy results in search. He reverted them to bring more spammy results in because it kept people on the site longer, because they'd have to create more searches, because the results would be worse, which would lead to more ad impressions. That's a long way of saying Google's a ripe target right now because they've been on a downward trend, and frankly, they suck right now. So the hypesters out there are loudly yelling that AI is destined to replace Google search. I've heard this all over the place, that it's going to replace Google search. But let's think about this in detail for a minute. There are three main types of queries that people perform with search. The first are navigational queries. The overwhelming majority of Google's queries are navigational. These are the top 20 queries that anybody performs on Google. I love number 4. The number 4 most searched term on Google is Google. So if you take a look here, and here, just for good measure, here are the last 10 of the top 100. So you can see here, out of the top 100, the vast majority of queries are navigational queries, people trying to find another website to go to. So for the overwhelming majority of current searches, LLMs provide no advantage whatsoever, none. The next most popular type of search are informational queries, such as Philly score, what is the weather, or what time is it? Again, no real advantage for LLMs whatsoever. In fact, a major disadvantage, because the information returned is often far out of date or completely and laughably false. So for those of you who are not football fans, Bill Belichick did not win a single Super Bowl before Tom Brady joined the team, let alone 3, as ChatGPT is claiming here. The third category accounts for less than 1% of all queries. Exploratory queries, such as, how can I make fudge without sugar? Or who are some of the best jazz drummers ever? For these, there would be some utility for LLMs. But again, this is a minuscule number of queries. And I say it as utter nonsense that LLMs will mean the end of search technology. In fact, having it rammed down our throats, as it is right now, hello, Microsoft, with your 18 versions of Copilot coming at me from every direction, will likely make search even worse than search optimization already has because of the ability to put spammy nonsense out there in the ongoing SEO battle to the bottom. So that's just search. But this is happening everywhere. For example, Google Books is now being infected by AI-generated garbage, making the tool less and less useful by the day. So this is happening everywhere. This is one of the most iconic photographs ever taken. It was featured on the June 1985 cover of National Geographic, and it was taken in 1984 by Steve McCurry. The woman pictured is 12-year-old Sharbat Hula, and the cover brought attention to the plight of women in Afghanistan. It has been celebrated for decades as one of the most amazing photos ever taken, except that by now you've guessed, it isn't. Sometimes it's easier to show rather than tell. This was generated by a user on the Midjourney subreddit with the prompt, an average woman of Afghanistan. The original photo had many ethical issues in the first place. She was unnamed in the photo. Her face was shown uncovered against her beliefs. She was a refugee who was not paid, while her famous face made millions for the parent company. And that doesn't even start to talk about potential issues of copyright. Justice Potter Stewart of the Supreme Court once famously said, "I cannot define pornography, but I know it when I see it." Here we see the blatant plagiarism and infringement that lazy generative models enable, encourage, and promote. I know it when I see it. And if you think that was just a one-off, here's another image easily generated with a prompt of simply Afghan girl. Look familiar? There may be some hope on the horizon, but we'll see if Congress can actually get anything done. Call me skeptical. The other problem is that the models aren't being built to support citing and references. These generative models cost millions of dollars to train. If somebody wins a copyright lawsuit, and there are many out there right now, there is no simple DMCA takedown procedure. To remove the offending content, the entire model must be retrained at the cost of millions of dollars and a huge environmental impact. So even beyond these ethical issues, the technical issue is this. The copyrighted content used to train these isn't tagged or removable. It becomes part of the dependency tree of these models with billions of parameters. Companies are running out of venture capital on one side, so the free ride is about to be over. We already see Stability AI has run out of money. They just burned through all their VC, giving away, free clicks to try to get popular, and they lost. On the other side, model trainers and the Wall Street Journal are now warning that within a year to 18 months, we're going to run out of data to train on. So these models will stop making any kind of exponential leaps because we will be actually out of text data for them to train on the internet. And most importantly, people are beginning to ask some really hard questions about acceptable error rate and our humanity. So that brings me back to AI. With the current hype around AI, we face a far more dangerous problem than with Second Life, or with crypto, or blockchain, or any of those other tech bro-driven trends of the past several decades. We already face a problem with a shared collective truth that drives humanity farther to extremes. In 2016, I witnessed an election in the United States decided by less than 80,000 votes across 3 states. I'm convinced at least 80,000 votes were swayed by troll farms created by bad foreign actors to increase the amount of outrage about what are really non-issues, with lies and deceit. And we're just starting another election cycle, and I believe we are still wholly unprepared. The social media and traditional media companies continue to be complicit as outrage is good for their bottom line. More clicks for ads, more money for them. And we've already heard a Biden deepfake in the primary that was encouraging people not to vote. That's just the start. Thinking that these models, AI, are knowledgeable or meaningful is actively dangerous. They have been trained on vast swaths of misinformation available on the internet. This will push us away from any kind of collected truth even farther. Tech companies are actively using LLMs to give answers to people seeking knowledge online. And we know these LLMs frequently give the exact opposite of the truth. And now some people are suggesting that we use this in our classrooms, in our K-12 spaces. Are you kidding me? The recent release notes for OpenAI's GPT-4 release said it is less likely to make up facts. Pause and think about that sentence for a second. Less likely to make up facts. You can't make up a fact. A fact is or it is not. It is the truth. You cannot just sit there and make up facts. You cannot be less likely to make up facts. That is an impossible sentence by the very nature of what a fact is. And this is the level of hype that we are dealing with. And this risks these falsehoods becoming part of the permanent record, blocking the path between humanity and more legitimate testable sources of information. We risk the line of truth becoming so blurred it is invisible. There is some hope on the horizon. The federal government is starting to move. Although the same companies that were begging for regulation a couple months ago are suddenly resisting, I'm shocked. And we're still being asked to pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, because there's a lot of human gaps that are being, a lot of gaps within these models that are being filled in by humans behind the scenes. Ultimately, my hope is that sunlight may prove to be the best disinfectant here. We're already starting to hear people who were expecting miracles and calling them mirages by rolling out AI, expecting it to be a cure-all. We're seeing the same companies that hired stupid and fired stupid in the pandemic doing it again, but that's just kind of their routine, and I've gotten used to it. My other hope is that we can start to have some real conversations without the fanboy-driven hype to find out, because there is definitely a there here. There is an undeniably cool technology and potential here. But the amount of hype happening right now is truly stopping us by finding out how we can use this technology to improve the human condition and separating the wheat from the chaff. So I don't have any easy answers, but I know as technologists, we should also be responsible stewards, and we must do better. Thank you very much.